As far as I know, Wizards of the Coast doesn't have a rule against that, but it kind of seems kind of unethical. I mean, if everybody's doing it like they are in cycling, then it makes sense. Then you kind of have to do it. If you're not doing it, then you're going to lose. Hi guys, it's Owen here from D20. I just want to remind you before I get started today that you have it in the power of your hands to support this channel. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can head over to patreon.com and you can become a patron either at the $1 level or higher. The more you go, the more benefits you get out of it. But every little bit helps and every pledge is greatly appreciated. You can help in other ways too by commenting, subscribing, liking or sharing these videos on your platform of choice, whether it's here on YouTube, on Facebook, Twitter, anywhere else you go. All of those things help because it gets this content in front of more people, and the more people that engage with it, the more likely it is to be shared with more people, and that ultimately is the point of this exercise. All right, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. I would normally be doing a rant this week, but today I want to talk about something. It's not really a rant, it's more kind of a thinking out loud, just to sort of articulate my thoughts on this topic, and maybe you've got some interesting ideas and we can get a conversation going about it. That'd be interesting. And that's what I want to talk about today is called multiboxing. Now that's the name that it's given in World of Warcraft circles and probably other similar games. In different kinds of games, I think it has different names, or maybe it doesn't have a name at all. Although I'll be talking about World of Warcraft just now, the place where I see it most frequently is in Pokemon Go. So what this looks like is you've got one player who's got multiple devices. Let's say he's got two phones. He's logged into a different account on each phone and he's able to play at the same time. Now, usually it's two if they're multiboxing in Pokemon Go because you've only got two hands. But I've seen guys with up to 6 different devices, each with its own account, playing simultaneously. So when you're doing that in Pokemon Go, what it means is that you can effortlessly take down a prestige gym like that on your own. You've got six different devices. You're logged in each one. Each one is a relatively high level character. Let's say you're level 20 plus. You can log all 6 devices into the same gym and you can fight it down easily like that, no matter how big the defenders are in the gym. And it also means you can then fully occupy the gym yourself. If you've got 6 different devices, that's an entire full gym. Also means that if your guys are high enough, if your accounts are high enough level, that you can effectively solo a level 5 raid. You can go into a legendary raid by yourself, fight that guy down, and potentially catch 6 versions of that legendary. Now, granted, you're not catching all 6 on the same account. Each one is a separate account, but it does upset the meta somewhat when you're able to solo raids when people who are only playing with one account can't do that. Now, granted, people who are playing with 2 accounts can't do it either. You need at least 2 of those guys to be able to pull off a level 5 raid, but it makes a dent. You can see how it would affect the meta of the game, where you need fewer actual players to complete the tasks that are designed for multiple players to engage in. This becomes a particular issue when you're talking about controlling gyms. So this has happened to me where I'm walking along through the park and I see that there's a gym there. It's a yellow gym. I'm a blue player, so I'm going to fight that gym down and put one of my guys on there, which is a perfectly normal thing to do in Pokemon Go. But as I'm fighting down the gym, I notice that the Pokemon on the gym, the defenders, are being fed berries from somewhere. And if I knock a Pokemon off the gym, it's immediately replaced by another Pokemon. In other words, somebody is actively defending that gym as I'm fighting it down. Now, as it happens, this almost always happens to me with spoofers, which is people who are cheating in a different way. They're using software to fake their GPS location on their device, so the game thinks that they're standing there next to the gym, but they're not. They could be anywhere in the world. But they're not only doing that, they're also multiboxing. So they've got multiple accounts logged in on different devices, and they're all actively defending this gym at the same time. And it becomes really upsetting. I mean, it's happened to me more than once that I've decided to fight down a gym so that I could drop one of my guys on there to earn some Pokecoins. But I haven't been able to do it because the gym is being actively defended by probably only one other player who's multiboxing and spoofing at the same time. And it's demoralizing. Once I've gone through the roster, I've fought through all 6 Pokemon defending the gym 2 or 3 times. It's knocked down a bunch of my guys. It's now really expensive in terms of revives and potions to get my guys back up again, not to mention the time involved in doing it. I'm just going to give up and carry on. In other words, it's discouraging, and it kind of ruins my day. It makes me feel like not playing anymore that day. And I'm sure I'm not the only Pokemon Go player who's experienced something like this. Having to deal with multi-boxes, especially spoofing multi-boxes, is it's not fun. Actual multi-boxes, look, I mean, it's beneficial. It's happened to me more than once also that I've been out in the Cape Town CBD looking for a raid, and I've come across one or two other players who are both multi-boxing, and between the 2 or 3 of us, we've been able to get that raid down. And you know what? It helps me because now I get to do this raid that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do because there weren't enough other physical players around. But those guys are getting more out of it than I am, and frankly, they didn't need me to be there. Yeah, so that's an issue with Pokemon Go. But now, what's interesting with Pokemon Go is that it's one of the few games that I'm going to talk about today, or it's the only game I'm going to talk about today, in which multi-boxing is actually against the rules. It's Niantic, the company that produces Pokemon Go, is explicit about the idea that 1 account per player. So these guys who are multi-boxing, I could potentially report them to Niantic for doing so. I don't feel as strongly about multi-boxing in this context as I do about spoofers. If I catch you spoofing, I'm going to report you to Niantic like that. Multi-boxing I don't feel as strongly about, so I'm probably going to let it slide, and in fact, it kind of benefits me. And you know what? The guys who are doing most of the multi-boxing in our local community are well known among other members of the community, which means that if I were to rat them out to Niantic, I would be the arsehole. That's kind of a weird situation to be in. But there's another example, and that's, as I mentioned to begin with, World of Warcraft. I've only seen this a handful of times, but it's a fairly well-known situation. And the way this works is you've got one physical player who has multiple, sometimes they're physical PC boxes, sometimes it's one really powerful PC box that's running multiple virtual machines, and he's able to output his keyboard and mouse commands to all of those different machines. Each machine is logged into a different World of Warcraft account. Now, granted, these are all paid accounts, so he's paying for every single one of those accounts, and he's controlling multiple identical characters simultaneously going through the game. Now, there are situations where this is kind of annoying. Especially if you're running a PvP server, and I know that PvP servers are kind of sort of going away. It's so easy to get ganked by 8 guys, one guy who's multi-boxing 8 characters running a single rogue. He walks up behind you and takes you down. It's really difficult to deal with that, especially if you're playing on your own, or if you're part of a small guild and you don't have the firepower to go 8-on-1. If you'd be perfectly happy going 1-on-1, but 8-on-1 just isn't fair. That kind of sucks. I mean, there also have been extreme examples in the past of players multi-boxing 80 to 100 characters at once. Granted, they're paying for 80 to 100 different accounts, and they've invested in all this hardware and that kind of stuff. But when you have that high a concentration of player activity in a single zone in World of Warcraft, it makes the game kind of unplayable for other players, because not only are they dominating the meta, there's no chance for anybody else to even survive or to pick up the stuff that's dropped by bosses or whatever. In an area like Tanaan Jungle, they can go and one-shot one of the big rares and pick up the mount if they're doing mount farming. But also it causes things like server lag, so much so that people in the area other players in the area are not able to even play because there's so much of a laggy experience, and it can even bring down a server. That's been known to happen. So it amounts to a distributed denial of service attack, a DDoS attack. Now, Blizzard have been emphatic. Blizzard are the company that produced World of Warcraft. They've been emphatic that multi-boxing is not a problem. They're perfectly okay with it, and I can kind of get that because, I mean, these guys are paying for 30 or 100 or however many accounts simultaneously, so Blizzard kind of score. The downside is that it can have a negative effect on other players, and I'm not sure what Blizzard's official position on that is, but if you feel like digging through the forums, you can find out what that situation is. Generally, however, they're in favor of multi-boxing. That seems to be okay. The third example where I've seen multi-boxing happen is in tabletop gaming, specifically in Magic the Gathering. So it works slightly differently in Magic the Gathering because if you're in a Magic tournament, at least in an in-person, a paper Magic, as opposed to online Magic, if you're in a paper Magic tournament, you can obviously only play one game at a time. You can't be entering a tournament multiple times yourself with multiple decks. But what some guys will do is one player who has multiple decks and sufficient financial resources, he will sponsor other players to participate in the tournament. He'll pay their entry fee, he'll lend them a deck, show them how to play the deck, and then the agreement is that at the end of the tournament, whatever that second player wins from the tournament gives back to the first player. So he's basically playing on behalf of the first player. Which means that, in effect, that first player now has 2 entries into the tournament instead of just 1. And I've seen this happen, that first player, that multi-boxer, can be lending out as many as 3 or 4 different decks during the tournament. And this is an interesting thing. Now, as far as I know, that's not against the rules. Wizards of the Coast, as far as I know, doesn't even have a rule about that, not that I've seen. And I'm not a Magic judge, but I did take the test once, I did the reading. So I didn't see anything about that. As far as I know, it's not against the rules. And it doesn't seem to happen very often. But I've seen it happen firsthand at least a couple of times, where you got this, amounts to multi-boxing. And this opens interesting questions about sort of a kind of meta strategy. Now, this is a thing that you see all the time in games like, in sports like professional cycling, where at the top, the pinnacle level of competitive cycling is dominated by teams. So you as a single solo rider, there's no point even entering those competitions. I'm not sure if you even can. I don't know. I'm not that into it myself, but I've been briefed on how this whole thing works by a family member who's really into it. But at this level of competition, teams are how it works. So although only one person can win the race, you've got multiple players or multiple cyclists who are working together to manipulate the flow of the what they call the peloton, so that the designated winner, the leader of the team, gets to be in front of the team and hopefully in front of everybody at the last minute. So they've got some guys who are good at climbing, so they'll use slipstreaming to pull him up the steep climbs. You've got other guys who are good at short sprints, and they'll take the lead in certain parts of the race, and they'll try to do like blocking tactics and all kinds of fancy cool stuff to make sure that the other teams don't get in front, so that in those last few seconds the main guy can win the race. And I can foresee that kind of a thing happening in a Magic tournament. If in a sufficiently large Magic tournament, if you have some of these multi-boxers, let's call them Magic teams, where you have one designated winner in the team and then you have a bunch of players, they can, if there are enough of them, manipulate the results in random pairings so that their designated winner can get it to the top 8, and then maybe even the top 4, or even the top 2 right at the end. Of course, it doesn't necessarily determine that he wins at the top 2, but even that can be manipulated. I mean, if you've ever watched the TV show Survivor, it's a fascinating show from a sort of a theory of gaming point of view, because you see all these players who are trying different strategies, and there's no established meta that actually works in this game because it's so open-ended. But a common strategy that you see them engaging in Survivor is you'll have players forming alliances, so that you have in the final 2 a strong player and a weak player, which then guarantees the strong player a win. Now, I've never seen that actually happen in a Magic tournament, but I can imagine that it could. If you had a team dominating or at least influencing the meta of a tournament, there's no inherent reason why you couldn't end up at the end of the day with the final 2 of one strong player and one weak player, which guarantees the strong player a win. As far as I know, Wizards of the Coast doesn't have a rule against that. But it kind of seems kind of unethical. I mean, if everybody's doing it like they are in cycling, then it makes sense. Then you kind of have to do it. If you're not doing it, then you're going to lose. In the case of World of Warcraft, it's not really all that beneficial, although in certain situations it can be detrimental. Actually, the game is so varied and diverse, it only gives you an advantage in certain circumstances. Like there are certain raid boss fights where having 20 identical rogues might actually help, but there are plenty of other boss fights where it doesn't, where individual action is equally important. I mean, you're not going to get through a mythic level Tomb of Sargeras kill Jaden boss fight where individual players have to run to a specific spot on the battlefield at a specific time to soak up damage. Having 8 of the same players all running to the same spot and soaking up that same damage, and then you don't have enough players to go and soak up damage in the other spots later on, that's not going to help you. That's going to cause a wipe. So on average in World of Warcraft, I'm not sure that multi-boxing really helps you. But in Magic, I think it could. In Pokemon Go, it definitely does. which is probably why it's been banned by Niantic. But what do you think? So this is the question that I'm wrestling with. In games where there aren't specific rules about it, or perhaps there are rules about it, but they're not strictly enforced, what are the ethics of multiboxing? Isn't it the intent of the game, especially in something like Magic or World of Warcraft, that you as a single player are supposed to be playing the game on your own? I mean, isn't that the whole idea, to be a single player engaging in this experience by yourself? I mean, that's certainly what Niantic are enforcing with Pokemon Go, although as far as I know, the multi-boxing rule isn't that strictly enforced. I've never heard of anyone being banned for doing that. And frankly, within the local community, if we were to report anybody for doing so, it would, it would result in social censure. In World of Warcraft, like I said, it's not against the rules. It's perfectly acceptable, except in situations where it actually causes playability issues for other players. And in Magic, as far as I know, there is no rule against it. But is it ethical? Is it a good idea? Is it fair to be dominating the meta like that? Especially in a situation where not everybody is doing it. If you're multi-boxing a Magic tournament and everybody else is just there on their own because they've got just the one good deck and they've got just enough money to pay the entrance fee, but you've got enough money to pay for 5 entrance fees, you've got 5 friends and 5 top-end decks, and you have the capacity to dominate the meta of that tournament and perhaps even manipulate the results. Is that fair? Is that okay? What do you think? On one hand, it kind of seems unfair, but on the other hand, perhaps it's stimulating a new level of competitive engagement where, because some guys are doing it, everybody else has to do it too, or else you're going to lose. So maybe that behooves the rest of us to look at setting up Magic teams so that we can participate in an equal level, because that's what's happened with cycling. You just can't participate unless you're engaging in that kind of a thing. I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. This is just something that's been keeping me up at night lately, but I'd love to know what you think. Drop a message below and we can continue the conversation. You can find me in the comment sections here on YouTube or on Facebook. You can also find me on Discord or Twitter or any of those sorts of places. All right, that's it for now. Swat.